He let a silent fart out to alleviate the gaseous methane tensions building in his stomach. Reddit, what's the most embarrassing thing you've done at a job interview? Accidentally puked on the interviewer. I was interviewing for a job at a Foot Locker, and the night before I had drank pretty heavily. I managed to cover up my hangover pretty well, but then the interviewer asked a question that could only have come from an old episode of Married with Children. If a customer came in and had a severe case of foot fungus, what would you do? For a split second I imagined a foot covered in horrifyingly bad athlete's foot, and that mental image prompted an impressive display of regurgitorial prowess. The bottle of whiskey I had drank the night before suddenly reared its ugly head, and I power puked over the interviewer. There was barf everywhere, on the interviewer, on the wall behind him, all over the desk, etc. In short, that morning's breakfast was everywhere but in my stomach. For about 30 seconds he sat there, stunned. Then, probably due to prompting from some sick part of my brain, I said, "Yeah, it'd be a lot like that." I was dismissed from the interview on the spot. They never called me back. I had just finished an interview in which I described attention to detail and an easy understanding of how things work as strengths of mine. I stood up, shook their hands confident that they liked me, walked to the door and couldn't figure out how to open it. Turns out it was a sliding door, not a push/pull door. After being told that, I turned around in shame and said, "Looks like I failed the door portion of the interview." We shared a laugh, and I was hired a few days later. I had an interview for Subway and made a foot-long joke. I didn't get the job. I'm going to flip this one around since my own most embarrassing moments aren't that bad. I have, however, witnessed a most embarrassing moment as an interviewer. So we were part of a panel interview for a person in a counseling position. We had been through several candidates already and were struggling to find the right one. One afternoon, we have a woman come in and her resume seems to be just about right. But when we talk to her, something is just a little off. So after she leaves, we decided to ask the front desk person for her impression. Word of advice, interviewers do this a lot. If you're rude to the receptionist, it says a lot about your character. Anyways, the woman at the front desk blushes when we ask her and says that she actually does have an opinion, but feels a little embarrassed saying. We finally get her to admit that before the interview, she was in the restroom at the same time as this woman. She apparently took the noisiest, foulest dump of all time, and walked out of the stall and right out of the bathroom without washing her hands. And then went and shook hands with us. We are appalled and react verbally, only to turn around and find the woman standing right behind us. She had come back in to get a business card. She turned bright red and rushed out. When I was a teen, I was desperate to get a job, so during a job interview for a zoo, I said, "I'll do anything. I'll clean shit if I have to." They replied, "You might just have to do that." I was joking, but they had a serious look on their face. I was hired to take care of camels, llamas, goats, and horses. Mostly to clean their shit. But I could have gotten a cashier job for $0.15 more pay an hour if I wasn't so desperate. It wasn't what I said. It was forgetting to take off my sunglasses. I told the manager and the hiring manager that I had diarrhea. I had either food poisoning or a stomach bug, not sure which, but it was a rough night before the interview. During the interview I was sweaty, muddled and generally very uncharismatic. The worst interview I have ever done as I couldn't concentrate on anything other than not shitting myself. At the end of the interview we all stood up and I shook the hiring manager's hand, and before I shook the manager's hand I said, "I apologize if I seemed a little off, I'm just getting over a bit of an illness. Nothing serious, I hope?" Diarrhea. It still makes me cringe now. I didn't even shake the other manager's hand before I left, I just kind of mumbled my way out of the room. I said, "It's nice to meet you." Was told, "We'll let you know if we decide to hire you," and I responded, "You too." Was invited for an IT helper position when I was 17. Would help fix computers for people at a shoddy PC fix shop. They asked me what's the first thing you check if a customer calls and says their screen doesn't turn on? I said, well, you gotta check if they have it plugged into a socket. They laughed and said, thank you, that will be it. Then led me to the door and gently pushed me out.
When the interviewer said, I'll give you extra hours if you bring me smokes every day, then put his hand on my leg and said his wife gives him passes to have fun. I also got a speeding ticket on the way to the interview. Was not my month.
The recruiter started to fold my CV into a paper plane during the interview. Didn't get the job. In one of my first interviews as a teenager. Interviewer, tell me one of your weaknesses. Me, I guess. I might be slow. I have no clue why I said it. I was feeling tired. I didn't really care about getting a job at Taco Bell and I was fat and winded all the time. I wanted to get some practice interviewing during senior year of college. The interview was for an insurance company. I asked them about a multi-million-dollar lawsuit going on against them. They weren't keen on answering that question. Not my best day. Probably one of my biggest fails at an interview. Couldn't find the building, had to call reception to direct me, arrived late, sweaty, flustered. I have a stutter that can be a problem on the best of days, let alone when I'm nervous. I arrive, introduce myself at the front desk, can barely even say my own name or why I'm there. Getting to the interview, while pulling out my resume, I managed to spill the entire contents of my pockets onto the floor/under the desk, leading to an awkward scrambling to pick them up while still trying to answer basic questions. I'm getting stuck on almost every word I try to say, and basically becomes an increasingly self-reinforcing downward spiral of fail. I'm stuttering because I'm nervous, and getting nervous because I'm stuttering. Getting stuck on my answers to questions makes me seem like I don't know what I'm talking about, and I feel like I'm coming off as a clueless fool. Forgetting to put my cell phone onto silent/turned off was simply icing on the cake when it rang near the end of the interview. I did not get the job. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, and share this video with your friends. It helps us continue to make these kind of videos because we love entertaining you guys. If you have a story to share, don't hesitate to tell it in the comments below. We will put it in one of our videos. Also, what was your favorite story from this video? A slow squeaky fart. Would have been easy to laugh off, but the people acted like they couldn't hear it, which meant I had to pretend like I couldn't hear it. I was recently invited to an interview to a small IT company. I had never visited their office building before and was also nervous as hell. The office was entered through an elevator and the coat rack was behind a corner in a small corridor. The twist, there was a wall-sized mirror just opposite the coat rack, so when asked to leave my jacket and other stuff and pointed towards it, I, while trying to keep up a lively conversation with the interviewer, proceeded to walk straight into the mirror in a decent pace. The interviewer had a good laugh about that, and the ice was broken for the rest of the interview. That went considerably better since they called me back and eventually hired me.
I had a job interview in the afternoon, so I brought my stuff along to change from my half day at work. Since I packed in a rush, I had accidentally brought 2 left-footed black high heels with different heel height. Wasn't bad for the sitting down questions, but then they decided to give me a tour of the building after the interview. I sounded like a Clydesdale with a limp going through the hallways. I went through the whole interview really well. I was confident, nice, I thought I was generally appealing. Then I got home and realized my left boob was hanging out. Not all of it, I was wearing a bra, but I was wearing a new shirt and didn't realize the material was going to do that. I did not get the job.
Caught looking at the interviewer's rack. Get the job, I did not. Word vomit mostly. Worst phrases I have said are, I'm like, drooling, or, I'm not very smart. I laughed and shot a booger out of my nose. Probably 6 years ago, I went to an interview referred by my childhood family friend. She grew up to be a really cute and smart girl, had some fun, for a lifeguarding position at a local swimming facility. I suck at swimming, embarrassed myself after diving into the pool and my trunks fell off. Some would say that the opportunity for a job slipped away. I was so nervous, I had my hands under the table. I was subconsciously picking my cuticles. I picked until they bled. At the end of the interview, I saw my hand with blood dripping down it and panicked. I had to shake hands with my left hand. This was very awkward considering the man already had his right hand extended. No, didn't get the job. In my very first IT job interview, I was brought to a small conference room and I was interviewed by one of the software managers. About 20 minutes into the interview, he appeared happy with my responses and he said he was going to turn me over to a different manager for the next round of questions. He left me in the conference room alone with the door closed. I was nervous and socially awkward. I began to mentally rehearse what to do when the door would open in a few moments and the next guy would walk in. I decided I would stand up, shake his hand and introduce myself by name. I continued to wait. It seemed like forever. Then, the door opened. I carried out my pre-planned routine. I stood up, took a pace forward, shook his hand and said, "Hi. I'm such and such." At that point, I became conscious of that fact that two people were in the doorway. The man whose hand I just shook smiled at me and said that he's the guy who just interviewed me. The next guy was standing behind him. After that awkward moment, he introduced me to the next guy and I ultimately got the job. Interviewer, if you could pick any historical event from any time to have the current population relive, what would it be? Me, the assassination of Osama bin Laden. Interviewer, excuse me? Me, death isn't good or anything, but if one bad guy dies it's not so bad, right? Plus there was a huge surge in pride for America. I then proceeded to quickly stand up, trip over the chair and leave. I had never really been interviewed for a job, so when at the end of the interview the woman asks me if I had any more questions, I just replied, "When can I start?" She laughed and said, "Okay, how about Monday?" It took me a couple of minutes to realize why she laughed at my question. Accidentally being an arrogant prick got me a help desk job at a bank. A friend's story here. Interviewer, what is your biggest weakness? Friend, I sit down too much. Not me, but the experiences of one of my best friends. He went to an interview for a job which seemed ideal for him, however he had been suffering from an upset stomach for several days. He arrived at the office reception, and a rather large overweight HR lady came and met him downstairs at the front desk. She told him to follow her, but on approaching the elevator his anxiety kicked in. Him, "I'm sorry, but I can't go in there." Her, "Why? It's 30 floors to my office." Him, I have a phobia of them, confined spaces, fear of falling sort of thing. Can we take the stairs instead?" So the overweight woman was forced to hike 30 flights of stairs with him to show him her office, much to her annoyance, and nearly had a heart attack in the process. On arriving at her office, she practically collapsed, annoyed beyond belief, whilst he said his stomach was growling like a famished bear. She told him to sit down, and in the process of sitting compression he let a silent fart out to alleviate the gaseous methane tensions building in his stomach. He said the small enclosed office immediately turned into a putrid eye-watering, throat-etching egg, garlic and onion sulfurous potpourri of nausea. The HR woman was forced to get up and open the windows, and when she came back he couldn't hold the next one in and let it out, this time an audible one that she could not fail to notice. He said she tooted very loudly. After being asked some questions, he said another more senior manager entered the room to join the interview and was met by the smell, much to my friend's great embarrassment, especially when he commented, "There's a very putrid smell in here. Is there something wrong with the waste pipes, Jane?" The HR woman replied, "No, it's not from the pipes," looking incredulously and accusatory at my friend at the same time. They all continued with some interview questions just as a formality, but he knew he had lost any chance of the job, having just humiliated himself to the highest degree possible. The cherry on the top was when the woman flatly refused to offer to show him the way out, by taking him down the stairs, and instead offered as a parting gift some indigestion tablets she had, commenting, "Oh, one last thing, I think you need to take a few of these." I was interviewing with a doctor and he mentioned how one of the children he treated was retarded, but he was able to save his life. I chuckled when he said retarded and he was like, "That's not that funny, actually." Needless to say, I didn't get the job. Learn from my mistakes. We have reached the end of the video, so if you laughed and found this entertaining, make sure you show your support. It's free, and it helps us make more videos like this one. Have a fantastic day, you.